So you could think of it almost like a rubber band. So here is the $42 is the base, and then the present keeps going farther and farther and farther and farther and farther away from it. And eventually it's going to snap, right? Because this is going to lose all relation to this and the rubber band snaps. Now, what the revaluation, what they're talking about, what the people who do not understand money saying is, if we revalue this to $3,000, it'll just go bloop, and then there will be no more stress on the banking system, and there will be no more stress on the monetary system anymore at all, right? We're just going to go boop. It's just a technical. It's just a balance sheet issue. It's a gimmick. Doesn't mean anything, but it'll help. It'll help the Treasury Department, pay some bills. I could have an ounce of gold for $42.22 on an infinite time horizon at the end of time, or I can have it right now for $3,000. So if I bring that to the present day, now I can say, well, I can have at the end of time itself, I can have $3,000. I can have gold for $3,000 an ounce, or I can have gold for $3,000 an ounce right now. So what are you going to do? People say, well, I'm not going to live till the end of time, so I'm going to take $3,000 right now. So everyone rushes out to buy gold, and that skyrockets the spot price of gold. So once again, back to the rubber band, it just shifts over. And so now the statutory price is $3,000. And the market price is $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 an ounce. And this will happen, within a couple of days as well.
Maneko 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Phil Lowe. He hosts a channel called The Bitter Draft. You can find him on Rumble. He also does live streams, I think, and videos with Rafi Faber of the Endgame Investor. I think you've been here on the channel once, haven't you, Phil?
Twice. I did once. I did a Sunday live stream with you, Clive, and Rafi, and then I
Yeah,
did a interview with you.
yeah. It was great to see you back. How are you
Oh,
doing?
always a pleasure. I watch you every morning, Mario. So I'm
Oh,
a big fan.
thank you. Thanks. So I wanted to start out with the new administration and President Trump. And you think no matter what he does, he's going to face the end game. So maybe you could start by explaining to me and the viewers what you think the end game is going to be like, and then second, how you think he's going to deal with it. And I know you made this video before he took over, so maybe your opinion has changed on how things are going.
Sure. My next video is actually going to be advice I would give to President Trump were I on his council. So you've somehow dived into my head and knew what I was going to do next. But I can give you a preview right now. So the end game is absolutely inevitable. There's nothing that Donald Trump or anyone else can do, because we have essentially printed notes for money we don't have, and if you math it out, we have. Theoretically, there's 8,300 tons in Fort Knox. We've printed notes for 90 million tons of gold. So there's nothing we can do to cover this. We must default. Either we do a technical default where all the banks go out of business and we revalue to gold on just the cash front after a deflationary crash, which is sort of what happened in 1929. Or we have a hyperinflation where we try and, the government tries to keep this party going and it fails, and the currency goes off into worthlessness, and then we revalue and chop a bunch of zeros off. Those are the only two possible outcomes. They're equally miserable experiences. They're slightly different in how they go through, but the result is the same. It's a revalued currency, and people rebuilding their savings, their real savings from scratch, starting at a much lower position from where they were. Now, Trump's economic advisors are not the best. There's like Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon and other. I've listened to them speak, and they have the wrong mentality about this. Their mentality is that they can save the fiat dollar, that this dollar can in fact be saved, but it cannot. So because they think it can be saved, they're thinking, oh, if we cut spending, if we put up high tariffs, if we bring manufacturing back, that we will somehow keep this, we can keep the fiat dollar going, and we don't need to go back to the gold standard. The problem is the way this scam is structured is that the debt must grow exponentially or you fall into a deflationary collapse. It absolutely must. So to get the debt to grow exponentially, the dollars must leave our shores and never come back because we need foreigners to take our dollars and give us stuff. And we in America need to sit down, get into debt, and don't do any productive work. That's just the nature of the scam. It's how it works. So if tariffs go up on our side and the dollars can't leave and get stuff in, then we enter into a deflationary crash, right? The banks can't generate any more debt in America, and therefore the banks start going out of business and shutting down, and the whole deflationary cycle starts, the whole deflationary crash. Now, if I could advise President Trump, what I would say is that you need to take the Javier Milei approach to this. Stop telling everybody, because right now Trump's messaging is, oh, once we're done, like the only problem you're going to have is you're going to have so much money, you're not going to know where to spend it all. That's literally his message right now. He said this, on his press conference. Oh, I'm going to make everybody here so rich. You need to take the Javier Milei approach where you get on TV and you say, we have no money, no hay plata. That was his inaugural address. No hay plata. Trump needs to be saying that right now because he's setting up expectations for things that he cannot possibly do. And people like you and myself who are telling people to invest in silver and gold or to buy, you can't really invest in it because it's money. I've said this before. That would be getting off a tangent. But to purchase silver and gold with your fiat currency, we are telling people to do that, but a lot of people that are big supporters of Trump maybe would otherwise listen to you and I if Trump was not saying, don't worry, I'm playing 4D chess here. I've got this all under control, and you're gonna be unbelievably rich when I'm done here. So the messaging he is giving out right now is going to impoverish a lot of his most fervent supporters who believe in his mission. And I don't think he's nefarious. I mean, there's always the chance there's something nefarious going on back there, but I don't think it's nefarious. I think he just genuinely believes that he can control the fiat dollar, which he cannot do. And so I would say that we on the sound money front must continue our messaging and not treat the president as an ally on this front yet until he realizes that he cannot control this situation and starts encouraging people to move into gold and silver directly.
Yeah, you said something about investing in gold and silver that you can't do it, and I agree with you, but there are times when the monetary system that we have is so out of whack that it almost becomes like investing. I would
Well,
say. I think, it is only in a gold standard or a sound money system that, like you said, it's money.
Sure. So the definition of investment is a vehicle to get more money. That's what it is. That's why people invest. That's why you loan out your money to bonds and stocks, is because you want more of it later on in the future. Gold is money. So investments are vehicles to get more gold fundamentally. Now there is the dollar in between those two things that is sort of muddying the waters. But at the end of the day, gold and silver are money itself. They're not vehicles to get more money. They are in fact money. Now, the way it feels like an investment is because their purchasing power in dollar terms is going up faster, especially now, going up faster than investment vehicles are able to generate more dollars to be able to get more gold. So you're better off buying the gold and silver right now than you are trying to invest to get more dollars to get more gold and silver later. So that's why it feels like it's an investment.
Yeah, and you spoke about some of his advisors, like Navarro and
Steve
Bannon.
Bannon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that they're very pro trade war and tariffs, and we've seen just as we're talking today that President Trump threatened Europe with a 200% tax on wines from the EU because the EU is put a tariff on U.S. whiskey. Um, I mean, are you of the view that? This could trigger what we had in the early 30s. Some people blame the Smoot-Hawley Act for the Great Depression, even though I think it was part of it. I mean, President Trump argued correctly that this could benefit the wine producers in the U.S., right? And you could see more wine growing here. But I think when you start a tariff war, it can backfire and it affects like your supply chain in ways that you never thought before. And I don't think President Trump and his economic advisors and also other countries who are retaliating, I don't think they realize how dangerous it is. And is that why you think there's a danger of a deflationary collapse, let's say, in the West?
Yes. So we have to separate this into two points. What tariffs would look like under honest money, and what tariffs look like under this inflationary system. Under honest money, yeah, tariffs are a tax, and all isn't if you're an anarcho-capitalist or an Austrian school economist, you would say all taxes are bad and have inefficiencies. So I don't particularly like tariffs. I think they're probably better than an income tax if you're trying to raise revenue like we were in the 1890s. But they're not good because they do encourage domestic wine production. That's if we were to use wine for an example. Yes, California wine growers would do better. However, everyone that consumes wine will end up paying more money. So wine becomes more expensive for the consumer. So everybody except California wine growers is worse off, and California wine growers are better off. And there's a lot more consumers of wine than there are producers of wine. So in general, in an honest monetary system, no, tariffs are not good for economic growth. Now, the inflationary monetary system, as I said, the dollars absolutely must leave our shores, and they can't come back. If they come back, then we go into then we experience hyperinflation, galloping inflation because the dollars are flooding back in. Now, fortunately, we don't really make anything anymore, so there's not a lot of reason. There's not a lot of stuff to buy that Americans make to export. There are some things, but there's not a ton of it. So what Trump is he doesn't realize what he's doing, but what he's inadvertently doing is he's crashing the expansionary monetary credit growth. And he's going to cause a panic like 1929. Now, I want to give the viewer and yourself some notes of real optimism here. The Great Depression was not caused by the crash of 1929. The Great Depression was caused by the socialist response to the crash of 1929. So Roosevelt, confiscated all the gold, and instituted all these trade restrictions, and quadrupled, quintupled, whatever the size of government, made all these new agencies that were running around wagging their fingers at free industry. And that ground everything to a halt, particularly the gold seizures, right? So people would have, gone and put their money in a bank. But and when I say money, I mean gold. But if you put your gold in the bank, the government's going to come along and take it. So what are you going to do? You're going to bury it in your backyard and you're not going to use it anymore. Right. So that ground things to a halt and really stopped the free flow of goods and services. I think Trump is more free market than that. Now, on the other side of this, Steve Bannon has said things that I really do not like. He has talked about confiscating wealth from the rich. He said the rich have been skating on this forever, and they need to pay their fair share. When you do that, the rich will bury their gold just as they did in 1929, and we don't want that. Now, we do want to end the inflationary system. The people who are rich now have gotten rich by standing next to the money printer. It's called the Cantillon effect. You just stand next to the money printer to get rich. That doesn't mean they were bad people. They just were following the price signal. The price signal said, hey, stand close to the money printer and you'll get rich. So someone like Elon Musk makes a rocket company that primarily caters to the government. SpaceX, it mainly does business for NASA and gets taxpayer funding for that. He made a electric car company that was responding to a bunch of government subsidies for electric cars, right? I don't know if there'd be a massive electric car market if there weren't a bunch of subsidies encouraging people to move into electric cars, right? Most of Elon Musk's companies are government funded and government subsidized in some way or another. That doesn't mean he's a bad person. He was just following the price signals most do. Now, that doesn't when the crash occurs, that doesn't mean that Bannon or if Bannon wants to raise revenue, that doesn't mean we should seize Elon Musk's wealth without recompensation. That's what people are complaining about in South Africa right now. They just passed a bill that they can, take white farmers' land without compensation and just seize it and give it to whoever they want. And then you end up with Zimbabwe, where people are starving to death and the currency's hyperinflating. So I strongly encourage Donald Trump not to listen to Steve Bannon on the economic front. Peter Navarro is a little bit better. He's just a big fan of tariffs, but as far as I can tell, he is free market internally, if not externally.
Yeah, you spoke about the Great Depression, and I agree that Roosevelt interfered a lot, the New Deal, and he did pass that executive order that kind of push people into handing in their gold. But even before that, from what I've read, Herbert Hoover was interfering as well. And I also think the banks, I think people lost a lot more money with bank failures during the Great Depression. Isn't that right? And do you think the banking system right now is like above board, because we saw in 2023 those bank failures in the beginning of the year with Silicon Valley Bank. Do you think the banks are safer now?
No, no, not at all. But let me go back to Herbert Hoover real quick. So that entire period, that late 1800s, early 1900s, was the progressive era, and the progressive era was intellectually. It was, if I could sum it up very quickly, the progressive era was marked by the thought that nature is messy, nature is sloppy, and nature is suboptimal, right? So we're letting these regional bank managers in Topeka, Kansas, and Podunk, Mississippi. We're letting these individual banks set their own interest rates, and they're getting it wrong because they sometimes they get the interest rates wrong and they run out of money, and they raid their demand deposits, and then they have a run on the bank, right? So this has always happened in banking throughout time. They said if we can get our hands on the demand, they mess up the time deposits, right? So, excuse me. Let me backtrack 1 second. A bank has two primary functions. One is the demand deposit. So you go and you put your gold and silver in a bank and you get notes off of it. And at any time, you can come back and you can reclaim your gold and silver. That's called a demand deposit. It's a checking account, right? The other service that a bank provides is what's called the time deposit. So that is where they find a lender and they find a borrower and they match them together and they say, we will give you yields. Now you have to pay for demand deposit. Nobody is going to sit there and offer you money to vault your gold for you and just look at it, right? So you have to, if you want somebody to protect your gold and have armed security and the big vault and the alarm system and the insurance, all that stuff costs. So you have to pay for demand deposit. Now, many people, especially if you have large deposits, they balk at the cost of that. And they say, well, why don't I loan some of it out in a time deposit? So the banker acts as a middleman. So he finds somebody who wants to borrow money and he connects them to you, and you get a percent of yields on your loan, and the bank gets a small cut of the yields as well. Now, the problem with time deposits is sometimes the banker messes up, right? He loans out your money to someone who can't pay you back, right? The business didn't work out, whatever. So the banker's sitting there tossing and turning at night. He says, "Oh my God, I've loaned out this bad loan and they can't pay me back and the time deposit's coming due. What do I do? What do I do?" And so he looks at the giant pile of gold sitting in the demand deposits and he says, "You know what? They're not all going to come back for this gold at the same time. So I will just take some gold out of the demand deposits, use it to pay off the time deposit, and I'll figure it out later, right?" The trouble is once you've done that, you've created Schrodinger's dollar, because you have a dollar sitting in the demand deposit and you have you have that same dollar that was used to pay off the bad loan. And there's only half the gold underlying that, right? The gold can only satisfy one of those $2. So you have guaranteed at some point, someone somewhere is going to have a bank run because there's no longer enough gold to satisfy all the notes for gold. Now, excuse me, Where was I going with this?
Herbert Hoover, I
Oh,
think.
yes. Okay. So the progressive era said when a bank has a bank run, it collapses, right? And the bank collapses, and everyone that had their deposits loses everything. And this has always happened throughout time. There's always some banks fail. And the competition between banks in general keeps the market healthy, the market overall healthy. But banks inside the market do occasionally fail. And it's a real tragedy for the people who put their investments in a bad bank. Now, the progressive era, the progressive intellectuals said, okay, we see this problem. Here's the problem. These bankers, these individual bankers are messing up. So what we'll do is we will create a central bank. And the central bank will manage the interest rates for all these people because these bank managers can't do it right. And so they formed the central bank in 1913. The Federal Reserve was formed in 1913. The other banks have pre-existed this. But the progressive movement is the intellectual underpinning for central banking. Now, of course, they made a whole hash. They made it much worse. You had the boom of the 19 teens and the 1920s, and then you had the huge crash in 1929. Now, Herbert Hoover, even though he was a Republican and the progressive movement was worming its way into all other intellectual disciplines, and even people who would previously be considered, real hardcore free marketeers. There's that saying: there's no atheists in a foxhole, and there's no free marketeers in a crash. Right? When there's a crash going on and everyone's losing everything, and not just a bank or a few banks, but every bank in the country is going bankrupt at the same time. The president it's almost obligated to try and get involved somehow. Now, there's nothing he can really do, but the intellectual movement was say, well, just print more notes and we'll inflate our way out of this. And now we have the modern banking system. So to answer the question about the modern banking system, no, the central bank has been printing inflationary notes over the banking supply, over the real money supply for almost a century now. The real money supply is the 8,300 tons in Fort Knox, which is probably not there, or at least not all there. And like I said, we've printed notes for 90 million tons of gold, over which we have 8,300. So we are in exponentially worse shape than we were in 1929 as far as the financial system goes. But once again, I want to stress that doesn't mean we're going to have something exponentially worse than the Great Depression. We don't have to. A financial panic is just a financial panic. If the market is allowed to clear, despite the fear and the shock of the financial panic, you can actually recover very, very quickly. So if you look at something like the hyperinflation of you've read the book, The Hyperinflation of France, right? That was a miserable experience.
Yeah,
But
my place in
go ahead.
France, yeah.
Yeah, hyperinflation of France in I think it's 1783, right?
No, it's Fiat Money Inflation in France, the book. It was between like 1790 and 1796 during
Okay,
the revolution, yeah.
right. Okay, you got it exactly right. So what happened right after that? Napoleon came in and started paying everything in gold and silver, and France recovered. They were no longer starving in the streets and eating their cats and dogs, and wearing rags for clothes. They did recover. So you can recover very, very quickly from a crash. If you respond with communism and socialism, then you don't recover. Then people do starve to death in the streets and you eat cats and dogs.
Yeah, and so you spoke earlier that you think Trump and his advisors are going down the deflationary path, but is there a possibility that they're going down the hyperinflationary path? And maybe you could cover that and how it would, in your opinion, affect people who have a lot of debt.
That will really be up to Powell, not Trump and Peter Navarro or Scott Bessent. Unless they seize it, they might seize control of the Fed from him, which I also recommend they don't. Trump loves to grab control of things. He wants, you're doing it wrong, give it to me. I would advise Donald Trump, do not grab control of the Federal Reserve. That is a live hand grenade that is about to go off. You don't want your name anywhere near that. But when the deflation, because of the fiscal policies of the administration, like the tariffs, that is accelerating the deflationary crash. the Powell can respond, and he probably will, by generating by a vertical money print, sort of like what we saw during COVID, but not turning off this time. So we're talking, I think Rafi's thrown out 10, 15 trillion dollars in a couple weeks of new credit being generated, right? And then just accelerating on from there. And then you have the zeros, you have the $5 bazillion notes, all that sort of stuff happening. If the Fed does not print, all the banks go out of business. We have the deflationary crash, and then we revalue, and we go on from there, and new banks emerge, and the Federal Reserve is hopefully destroyed. If the Fed does print, then the currency becomes worthless. Everyone abandons the currency. We revalue again, and then all the banks go out of business, and new credit emerges. Like I said, it's the same side of the coin. There are slight differences along the journey. So, for example, in a deflationary crash, you don't pay, most people that own houses and own mortgages, most people that have mortgages on their houses will have to default on their mortgages. Almost everybody will. So you're just going to say, and your house value is going to crash. So, like right now, for example, my house, I have like a $400,000 mortgage. My house might collapse down to $20,000 of value. So I tell the bank, look, I'm not paying a $400,000 mortgage for a $20,000 house, but I have some gold vaulted away. Why don't we work out a deal where I can trade you some gold? The bank will probably say yes at that point, because we're going to be heading back into a gold standard. In a hyperinflationary crash, the house value skyrockets to $1,500,000,000,000,000,000, and I can go, and my mortgage is still $400,000 because I'm in a fixed rate mortgage. And so I go and I take my broom in a broom pan, and I go and sweep up $400,000 worth of notes on the street. I just take it down to the bank and I say, here you go. Here is the entirety of my mortgage, paid off right away. Right. But if I don't have gold and silver, even though I've paid off my mortgage, I'm going to have to turn around and sell my house again to get gold and silver to buy food. So a lot of people think hyperinflation is, it is a credit collapse, so that you can, all the debts are forgiven. It's a debt jubilee. But everybody that hasn't stacked is now completely broke, because when you hold notes, when you hold dollars, you're holding someone else's debt. So if all the debt is collapsed, then you're holding someone else's worthless debt, means that your notes on that debt is worthless as well. So now you are in a position where you must sell your house to go get food. So either way, it looks almost identical. There are slight variations of the journey, but it's what flavor of crash do you want, Mario?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I had a look here, and you probably read this book, When Money Dies, about this.
Yes. Yes.
And on page, what page is it? 100, sorry, 226. They talk about 1924, the aftermath of the hyperinflation, that actually some creditors got some of their loans paid back at like 15% of the gold value prior to everything imploding. So the other thing I would say to what you said there, yeah, I think the debts will be wiped out, but don't be let's say 100% sure that
Sure about that.
they won't come back to try to get something from you. I think you mentioned that you could negotiate with the bank if you had some gold, but I wouldn't tell the bank I had any gold
Yeah.
personally. But so yeah, I think what you're saying then is that deflation or hyperinflation, uh, it's like a double-edged sword, and we might fall on whatever edge, and the consequence will be the same. In deflation, no one has any money. And in hyperinflation, everyone has loads of money, but it's worthless. So it's almost the same. Maybe we could conclude talking a little bit about the new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. You recently spoke about his knowledge of money, which you don't think is great. And then you spoke about revaluation, which is something apparently he mentioned, and then he said no. And yeah, maybe explain to the viewers how the gold market would be impacted if they raise the statutory price from $42 and 22 cents to the market price, how that would affect gold.
Sure. To do this, I have a very large budget, Mario. So I can afford a prop for this. So if you think of the statutory price of gold on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet is $42.22 an ounce, and the market spot price is 2,900. Actually, I think it's $3,000 right now. I think we just had a massive jump today. So the if you think of the dollar as a note for 142 of an ounce of gold, but the Federal Reserve, the gold window is closed temporarily, right? So it's like a restaurant. This is the example I use. It's like a restaurant. Let's say you have a coupon for one free meal at a restaurant, and you drive over to the restaurant, and the restaurant has a sign on it that says temporarily closed for renovations, right? That coupon is not worthless. Now, if the restaurant said, we out of business, out of business, lights off, that's now a worthless coupon, right? Because there's nowhere to redeem it. But because the restaurant says temporarily closed for renovations, you say, well, I'll just hold on to this coupon until the restaurant reopens, and then I'll go back and spend the coupon. So because the gold window is temporarily closed, that note still has some value. And if you listen to Nixon's speech, he specifically said, I have temporarily closed the gold window. He didn't say, we're done with gold, it's out of here. He said, we've temporarily closed it. So because it's closed, you can think of the $42.22 note coupon as an offer for gold on an indefinite time horizon, or even an infinite time horizon. So at the end of time itself, when the last stars have twinkled out and only black holes exist, you should be able to go down to the door of the Eccles building and knock on it and say, I would like to, can I redeem my note now, right? Can I redeem it for $42.22 an ounce now? But if you want it today, if you want gold today, you have to pay, that's like a futures contract. So if you want it today, you have to pay much more money. You have to, much more dollars. You have to pay $2,950, right? So you could think of it almost like a rubber band. So here is the $42 is the base, and then the present keeps going farther and farther and farther and farther and farther away from it. And eventually it's going to snap, right? Because this is going to lose all relation to this and the rubber band snaps. Now, what the revaluation, what they're talking about, what the people who do not understand money saying is, if we revalue this to $3,000, it'll just go bloop, and then there will be no more stress on the banking system. There will be no more stress on the monetary system anymore at all, right? We're just going to go boop. It's just a technical. It's just a balance sheet issue. It's a gimmick. Doesn't mean anything, but it'll help. It'll help the Treasury Department, pay some bills. If you were to revalue this to this, what would happen is it would just shift over. So we'd have the statutory price goes from $42 to $3,000, but then you can think of it as, so I could have an ounce of gold for $42.22 on an infinite time horizon at the end of time, or I can have it right now for $3,000. So if I bring that to the present day, now I can say, well, I can have at the end of time itself, I can have $3,000. I can have gold for $3,000 an ounce, or I can have gold for $3,000 an ounce right now. So what are you going to do? People say, well, I'm not going to live till the end of time, so I'm going to take $3,000 right now. So everyone rushes out to buy gold, and that skyrockets the spot price of gold. So once again, back to the rubber band, it just shifts over. And so now the statutory price is $3,000. And the market price is $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 an ounce. And this will happen, within a couple of days as well. Now, the gold is the price matrix, Mario. It is. We are still on a gold standard. We never left it in as far as pricing and other goods and services in gold. In 1971, right before they closed the gold window, a cup of coffee cost 5 cents and an ounce of gold was $35. So a cup of coffee was 1/700th of an ounce of gold. Now, a cup of coffee costs $3, a small cup of coffee. I think on Liberty Finance, I think I said $6. I meant to say 3 because I drink coffee at home, so I don't know what it is at a restaurant or at a cafe very much, but it's about $3 apparently. And gold is $3,000 an ounce. So it's 1/1000th of an ounce of gold. So coffee in gold terms has actually gotten cheaper over time, not more expensive. If gold goes to $3,000 an ounce, statutory, it goes to 15, 30, $35 and $35,000 an ounce, then we're going to see things like coffee being $35 a cup. We're going to see gas being $100, $200 a gallon, right? We're going to start seeing absolutely crazy, crazy prices in dollar terms just from the revalue. And this will happen within days to weeks of the revalue. This is why they don't revalue. You ever, because people say, this is my
Yeah,
rejoinder to say,
can
oh, go
I?
ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking of that because I've looked into this revaluation a little closer in the last few months because they're talking about all this gold going back to the US. And I actually researched, Phil, that the price of the dollar or the price of gold has been revalued four times. Once it was in 1838 from $19 and I think 33 cents to $20 and 67. That revaluation was 6.66%. Interesting number. And then Roosevelt, 30th of January, 1934, revalued it from $20.67 to 35. And then in 1972, they revalued from 35 to 38. And then the next year, they revalued from 38 to 42.22. And I looked at the free floating price of gold in the 70s. And after they revalued in 72, 73, gold was way above those statutory
Yeah,
prices and kept going. So I think you're right. You know, they haven't revalued it because they know it's like opening a Pandora's box, right?
absolutely. If it was just a balance sheet thing, they'd do it already. They would have done it. They would have done it hundreds and hundreds of dollars ago. And here's the thing. Here's the scary thing, right? So the revaluation from $20 to 35 was like a major epic shift in 1933, right? That was a big, big, big deal. We'd have to revalue to like $60,000 now, Mario. I mean, it's really scary if you think about how many notes for gold have been printed and how intense the revaluation will have to be. So no, this is like the idea that like it's just some sort of balance sheet gimmick and this is not going to affect our daily lives. Absolutely not. If they even attempt to revalue, they'll start the end game because we're going to be looking at $200 gasoline. With $200 gasoline, you have empty grocery stores, you have riots in the streets, you have Walmarts being burned to the ground. It's the end game. So they're not going to do it until the hyperinflation kicks in, and then it's going to happen anyway, whether they try to stop it or not.
Yeah, well, maybe it will be like Italy, where before the euro, a cup of coffee was like 5,000 lira or
Yeah.
something like that. But with that in mind, Phil, how do you think things are going to evolve from now until let's say the end of the year?
Till
And
the end of this year, I
yeah,
think I so
and
Ralph. Oh,
another
go ahead.
another part question into that. And how do you think people should prepare uh, financially? Because that's what we cover here. I know there's a lot of other things that one needs to prepare during a hyperinflation, but we'll stick to the financial part.
Sure. So Rafi is better at predicting the end game than I am, and he thinks the end game is nigh. So I tend to agree with him. I mean, I don't have a reason not to. So I would expect gold and silver, particularly silver, to start going vertical quite soon. Resource shortages everywhere. Chaos, panic. Dogs and cats living together, horses riding people, all that crazy stuff. Probably this year. And I'm hoping it is mercifully very quick. If they revalue to the $60,000 and tell everybody, hey, surprise, everyone's broke, then we can rebuild from there. And it should be, like I said, I'm hoping it's very quick. I'm hoping, and I think maybe I'm Pollyanna. Maybe I'm just relentlessly optimistic and I don't want to look at the truth. But I'm based on what I've seen, if done correctly, we can be back to doing wonderfully, firing on all cylinders, everyone working, everyone getting their savings in gold and silver. We can be back up to that in just a couple years. It's a tough couple years. It really is. But that doesn't, we are not condemned to 20, 30, 40 years of famine and Great Depression and, people boiling their shoes. None of that is required. So I want to leave people with the words of encouragement. As big as the financial panic is, and it is going to be big, as long as the market can clear, I think we will dodge the worst of it.
So how do you think
The
the
market clears.
no, but how do you
No.
think the things can be fixed? And what do you mean, yeah, by the market clearing?
Sure. So people will start selling their houses, and the gold and silver holders will be buying those houses for, like I think Rafi says about 7,500 ounces of silver for a house. I agree with that. We'll be buying, Lynette Zhang says 25 ounces of gold will buy a city block, including all the buildings. I agree with about that estimate. So the stackers will go out and become the next round of capitalists. And I mean monocle wearing, leather spats capitalists, undreamed of wealth and asset accumulation and very, very quickly. This is assuming no government intervention and no confiscations. But if there's no government intervention and the world can hold itself together well enough that the capitalists can go out there and acquire all the capital, then we're talking about Walmart's being turned into factories within weeks. People that know how to sew becoming seamstresses and generating clothes and locally, and farmers taking their goods to market in the ruins of the supermarket. So the supermarket will shut down, but farmers still got food they got to sell, so they'll drive their trucks over and they'll sell their goods in the supermarket, and people will still get food, right? It'll be a lot more decentralized, but it will still work. People have found a way to make these things work, and they work very, very quickly. So, what was the other part of your question?
No, I mean, yeah, I think what you meant then by letting the market clear it is letting the market do its job and have no government interference, and
Yes.
I think that's the only solution. I guess the big question is whether even President Trump, who's far from being a socialist, is if he's going to let that happen. Um,
Trump, yeah.
yeah,
Trump will be judged, but history will judge Trump by one thing and one thing only. If he takes down the Federal Reserve, if he shuts it down and returns us to a gold standard, he will be the greatest purveyor of human liberty since Thomas Jefferson. If he does not destroy the Federal Reserve and they try and save it and they, try and get this scheme, up and running again, then he's going to be a failure.
yeah,
And worse than that, he might end up being a tyrant because, the best of intentions doesn't matter if what you are doing is tyrannical.
yeah. And I think you answered my question already.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that would be the best thing because if you keep the Fed going and you keep at this game of printing funny money and trying to keep this debt bubble going, it's the end game is going to be a lot worse down the line. Is that the way you see it?
That is exactly how I see it. Exactly how I
Great,
see it.
great. Okay, Phil, that was really good talking to you.
Yeah, it's been a great chat, Mark.
It looks like your end game seems to be, I'm not saying it's happening right, it's going to happen tomorrow, but it seems to be, the balance seems to be shifting towards the owners of real capital.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
to conclude, like everyone get capital now. Get
Yeah,
real capital
that
right
means
now.
gold and silver, guys, not Federal Reserve, federales, right? Okay, great, Phil. I wish you, yep, a good day, and we'll speak later.
Take care. Take care, Mario.
Take care.